Oh, I'm supposed to introduce the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to PowerHouse Fence Show. I think this is season 2. It's definitely season 2, episode 27, 28, 27 and a half. How about that?
Episode 20-something.
27.75. All I know is it's going to be fire. Can I say that? This is the dorkiest thing I've ever
Guess
said.
if you want to.
Welcome back. My name is Zach. I didn't think of anything that rhymed with Dan.
Welcome back. My name is Zach.
I didn't think of anything that rhymed with Dan.
The only
But
thing
I bet you can.
The only thing I got's hand. Good
All right.
job.
Zach Shue, Dan Turbyville, PowerHouse Fence Show.
Good to see you, everyone.
Season 2, episode, the one after we had the 4th of July. Right. And this show is going to be titled What It Was Ain't What It Is.
Or what it is ain't what it was.
I like that.
We're not sure.
That works both ways. It's kind of a Seussian. We have a Seussian start, as in reminiscent of Dr. Seuss.
Oh.
To the show here with the rhyming and the wordplay. Don't get me started on that. I'll go on for days. So this show is brought to you by Memphis Fence Company.
I think it was just a little more criming.
MFC Manufacturing and Simpalo. Also partners with Thornton Fence Consulting Group.
That's it. We have a flag here now.
And
for today.
So the keynote of the show is basically, I think, open-mindedness, a willingness to accept the new in replace of the old, and that, there is certain benefit to experience and people having years of experience in a specific craft and trade. And obviously, we rely heavily on that, but also, certain things specifically, like we talk a lot about adopting software, being that Simpalo is a software that we both use and is currently for sale. So that's part of that. But having some open-mindedness to the changes in the business, I think one of the biggest ones, in addition to the software, would be company culture has been really important to me in the last couple years. What about you, man? Where are you at on that?
I think systems, practices, just the way that we do the things that we do. I think.
What do you got to say to if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
We'll get there. It's in here.
Okay, good.
We'll talk about that. So we are here, but we're not live.
This is pre-recorded.
Yep. So I think this will air on July 18th, which is 10 days from today.
You've been listening to that Unhinged.
I've listened to some. Yeah, I think I'm one behind now.
And who's responsible for making that?
So the whole My Salesman team, but there also was a producer, and I don't remember his name.
That's cool, though. But it's backed by My Salesman and a bunch of those people. Kind of.
Yeah, Joe Everest
involved in there
pretty
too.
Well.
Of Ozark Fence, right? Cool.
Yeah. So I've listened to some, and it's cool. And I like that they're like short little episodes. I think it was, like 15, 20 minutes long, something like that. So it's not a huge time commitment, and it's pretty interesting just to like tell a fence themed story.
Cool. So, yeah. You've also been working on the Mastering the Rockefeller Habits.
Yeah, so I think the book is called Scaling Up, maybe, and the topic is about the Rockefeller habits. I still can't figure that out, but yeah. So I've been working on that. I don't know. It's okay. It's not super captivating to me. It's not.
So you don't have any gems from your reading this week. All right, let's move on. Thank you, listeners, which I like this part better.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody who's listened, downloaded, joined in, logged in, high five, thumbs up, liked, any of those things, any way you've participated, really helps keep us going. And that's ultimately why we do it. So thank you guys very much for giving us a place and a space to kind of participate in the podcast world.
Yeah, if you think it's good, maybe give us some, likes or whatever things that Zach described, and maybe share with a friend even.
Cool.
So some other folks can join in on the fun here.
Events coming up that we will be in attendance at. Some representation of Memphis Fence Company and the PowerHouse Fence Show team will be at the West Coast Trade Show at booth 516, 518 in Reno, Nevada, September 5th through the 7th.
Ilaria did verify that those are correct.
Cool.
So
So
that's
those are our
good.
booths.
Yeah.
516, 518 in Reno, Nevada, September 5th through the 7th. That's a big old thing going on. Also in a trade show, in conjunction, there will be a golf tournament as well. And then in December, in Oklahoma at the Shangri-La Resort is the Thornton's Fence Business Conference in December. I said December, both ends of that, but that way you know what month it's in.
Made a December sandwich.
There you go.
Can't say you missed it. I think a link to Tony's events is in our description too.
Good.
So
It
you
always
should be able to
is.
see that if you want.
I mean, he's easy to find.
Yep.
He's got a lot of stuff going on too, not just the stuff we're going to. So check him out. Also, he's offered himself. He's been on the show a few times and offered himself to be available. If you can pin him down, ask him a question, he'll answer it. You don't have to go to one of these things to get some advice from Tony.
Yeah, but if you do go to one of these things, you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter whose events it is. His are good. There's others, but definitely get to something.
And now in this moment, we like to talk a little bit about what Simpalo did for us this week. Considering it's Monday here in virtual land, I've not used Simpalo today.
I've used it a little bit to help Claiborne with a job that had, I don't know, something like 12 different types of fence on it, and it was a big freaking mess.
I did that. What you're talking about. Yeah, last week before we left for the holiday. Same thing. 12 different sections of fence. It's for like a bunch of, there's like a church and a retirement home and a residence and then like some other office building, and they all kind of share a parking lot, and they want it subdivided in various ways.
Yeah.
So they gave me kind of a rough representation drawn on a Google Earth map. So then what I did once we took our field measurements is I've been able to import the Google Earth image and refine where our proposed fence lines will go, accompanied by the linear footage.
Yeah.
And gate placements in order to better help the customer understand what it is we're selling them.
Yeah, I think we kind of struggle with that one part right there sometimes, making people understand what we're quoting.
Well, I operate under the assumption that people know what the word picket is. And just as an example, not everyone knows what a picket is. I heard someone call it a vertical member. So then I've started using that because that's what that's what they said. So a horizontal member, a vertical member.
Right. Yeah. In fact, not people in the fence industry call pickets. Well, we use the word picket. Other people use other words.
Right.
Tines, I think, is a word that I've heard for them, things like that. So,
right. Just because, I assume the language we use because we hear it in here all day, every day, that, your average customer understands that. So just going a little bit further to explain and let them visualize the layout of the fence, any kind of tool that we can use to help them understand better what we're selling, which is not the intended purpose of Simpalo initially.
But it actually is kind of cool, though. I've never really thought this through. And so this is a neat thing about having a software is when you see people using the software in a way that you didn't really intend. I don't know if that's the right word, but, you didn't really design it for, I guess. But what's cool about that is while you're doing your takeoffs and generating material list, you're also creating your presentable for your customer in the same step. So you don't have to go to a different place and then create that.
That's right.
So that's cool.
Yeah. In the business to business, obviously residential, but since we're not doing that so much, that's not really applicable to my day to day. But in the business to business world, it's definitely applicable.
Yeah.
So that's how it worked for me in the past, and you too, obviously, same way. And being able to also able to subdivide those sections by groups of material to then submit separate material quotes to break all that out for the customer.
And then you have all your different sections of fence and everything broken out separately.
Right. Yeah. Options through A through A12.
Right.
Which is the 12th A in the 12th for whatever. 12 times 26. That's how many options there are.
Is that okay?
Get to Z and start over.
All right.
12 times.
I'm excited about this tool, Tom. I have something to share with the world.
Now it's time for tool time with Dan the Tool Man Turbyville. Bill.
So I just have to brag about a product that I personally use about 6 days a week here.
Cool.
So I wear some clothes from 1620.
Nice.
That's a American workwear brand. I think it's actually called 1620 Workwear. I bought my first pants from them in like 2021. So I bought 3 pair of pants, and I've worn them probably 6 days a week, sometimes 7, since 2021. Still the same 3 pair of pants. And these things, they have some sort of lifetime warranty on them. Like if you wear a hole in it, I don't think that's covered, but I think for like any of the seams, if they come unraveled, if the stitching fails, things like that. So I recently sent a pair of them back. And that's the thing that I want to brag about specifically is the process of sending it back. I just went online, filled out some form. They said, okay, well, here, put this in the box with the pants and ship it to this address.
Cool.
So I shipped it in, and then they sent me an email like, hey, your repair has been approved, and they fixed them and they shipped them back. So I do think I had to pay for the shipping from here to there, but I think that's the only thing it cost me. The repair was free and all that. And I mean, these are the pants I bought over 3 years ago, and they just restitched a seam that was coming apart.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I know you sold me on those or tried to sell me on those about 3 years ago, or we talked about that. And I think I mentioned to you that I just buy like the $30 wherever, department store jeans and tear them off like a paper towel.
Right.
And that's kind of, but I mean, that's a few rolls of paper towels now.
Yeah. I kind of like the fact that like, I don't have to go buy some more.
Yeah. That's nice.
Right. And then, I mean, I've done everything in these. I've put up
cool.
fence. I've farmed, I've work on some vehicles and equipment and all of that kind of stuff. And like, I'm still wearing the same ones. So they're super durable. They are heavy. Like they're heavy duty. I put on some other pants, I don't know, this weekend or something. And I was like, wow, it's like, don't even think I'm wearing anything. It's weird. But
let's hear it for 1620 Workwear.
Yeah. Cool. Anyways, good job, 1620. So you want to handle this? Let's hear this presentation you got for this little piece.
I don't know what this is.
It's a poem?
Okay. I'll read it. I've never read this before.
I know. That's why that's fun.
I'm tired of sailing my little boat far inside of the harbor bay bar. Let me start over. Because that sounded terrible. The kids would veto me if I was reading a book to them right now.
I think you should do it in a pirate accent.
I want it to be understandable in hopes that it actually may have some meaning behind it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of sailing my little boat far inside of the harbor bar. I want to be out where the big ships float, out on the deep where the great ones are. And should my frail craft prove too slight for storms that sweep those wide seas o'er, which is over in pirate, better go down in the steering fight than drowse the death by the sheltered shore. So basically this is saying, what I understand it to mean, it's better to have like taken a risk and lost than to have the regret of having not taken any risk, right? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, so that's by Daisy Reinhardt.
Daisy Reinhardt.
To give credit where credit's due.
I don't know why, because that was hard to read. And
go big or go home, man. Right?
I just said that.
I'd rather go out there and I'd rather risk it.
Spare me all the daisies and bumblebees or whatever this mystical fairyland is that you've procured for us, and just get down to business.
I like it. I like that. That's so that actually is from the Scaling Up book.
Okay, right on.
I had to while I was driving 80 miles an hour down the interstate, I was also rewinding it 17 times, searching Google, trying to find the quote, safety.
So
first.
Is it from a collection of poems or a play, or who knows? Who's Daisy
I don't
Reinhardt?
know. I don't know the history of it. It feels old.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
Yar.
All right. Next time in the pirate voice.
Oh, I had some good pirate jokes too, but we'll save that for another day, I think.
All right.
All right. So the topic of the show, I think that honestly, all jokes aside, that was cool. Thank you for putting yourself out there like that. It's hard to have someone else read poetry that you're kind of personally attached to. I know that's tough.
Personally attached. What's even tougher
I-
about that is to be accused of being personally attached to a poem.
Here's this piece of reading that I've felt personal to me, but I'm too afraid to read it. So I'm going to have you read it for me.
I'm terrified of speaking with these cameras pointed at me, Zach. Don't you know?
Just kidding. No, that's cool though. So that coincides with the title of the show,
It
and our
kinda
purpose
does.
here is that basically we're not saying screw it, the old way's old and that's stupid, out with the old and with the new, kind of, but not exactly. We're really saying, like, in order to perpetuate your business, your life, to grow as a company and as a person, you must be willing to take some risks in order to further your progression on the journey.
I think what I'm kind of saying is just be open-minded. Like,
Right.
that's the biggest thing, right?
Open-minded only goes so far if you're unwilling to take action.
Yeah. Yeah, so be open-minded, with the intent of possibly taking action. How
Right.
about that?
That's all right.
And so listen to things, look at things, see what's going on in the world. Notice that the world around you is changing, and you should probably be prepared to adapt and change with the world to an extent. And I'm not talking like any kind of, you know,
No, as it pertains to the business, the
Yeah.
things that we always talk about, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
introduction of software is a big one. I mean, for me, that was pretty tough.
Yep.
Basically, how my introduction to using software in my business was, I was being asked to log my own time,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, well, what the hell does that matter?
Mm-hmm.
And just the collection of data being important. We talked a lot about that with Tony Thornton, actually.
Yeah. So much like the people who today we asked to log their time, do they understand the reason?
Right. I had that conversation today with a person.
Did you?
Yes.
Man, I believe that's irony.
Yeah. So, and explained why. I explained why. And when I put it as simply as this, believe it or not, this tiny little thing could potentially gravely affect the future of this department of the business, then that seems to make sense.
Right. Something clicked with them a little bit.
But then again, I guess that also is dependent upon the trust I've established with my team.
Mhm. I think telling people why is an important piece of something that we frequently overlook.
Right.
The why is because I said so.
I just think about that on the, not to get too far off the business part of this, but it's all a cohesive piece for me. The way that I talk about our role here at Memphis Fence Company, I live this way, and I think parallels the way I live at home and outside of the business too, right? It's all kind of a cohesive piece. So I was thinking about that with the children. When they would ask why when they were younger, I would explain it to them because it worked. And now that they're teenagers and they have developed the power of reason, it's backfired completely.
Yeah.
Because if they don't like it and they can come up with a better reason, then they will.
Mm.
And I'm just like,
So now you have to have a debate.
Right. So I
Yeah.
raised little tiny lawyers, and they're their greatest defense attorneys. They're their own greatest defense attorney.
So I think that all of this kind of ties back in, right?
Right.
So the whole statement of like, because that's the way I said to do it, maybe that's not the way to handle things anymore.
Right. Or was it ever?
I don't know. I guess at some point it was effective since that's the way it was done. But is there a different way now?
I
And
think
I
at
didn't say
time-
better, just said different.
There's certain things. I mean, at times I have used that as like, this is coming from 10 years of experience of fabricating.
Mm.
I've tried this way, tried that way, tried this way. This is going to be very beneficial to you.
But why?
Why?
Yeah.
because it works good. I've proven it through.
So I think maybe like it works good because of 1, 2, 3.
Sure.
It worked good. Welder.
Well, I've tried it.
Yeah.
It works the best.
Right.
It's fast. It
Right.
does the job.
So if it's something that works the best for you, is it something that's going to work the best for someone else?
That's where I think you and I both agree on this, that we do allow some room for people to try other ways.
Right. If you have a way that's better, then prove it.
Right.
That's what I think. Prove it. All right. So none of that was even like planned. That was all just spontaneous. So yeah. What it is ain't what it was. What it was ain't what it is. Whichever way it is.
Right. I think so. Like our generation, I don't really want to say that, but I've encountered a bunch of dudes kind of our age in the trades, and it seems like a lot of us are all on the same page, and it's probably has to do with the connectivity through social media, through YouTube, where we're able to be influenced or influence each other in the way that through this immediate contact to information, it produces a readiness or a willingness to kind of make use of that, if that makes sense.
So I saw a quote from Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly the quote, and I didn't prepare to talk about this, but it was something like, he said, "I was never the most intelligent person. I was just the most curious." Right.
Cool.
And so I think why could just be from a place of curiosity, right? It's not,
Sure.
it's not like I'm trying to be argumentative. It's just why? I don't know. You know, like when your kids are little and oh gosh,
That's right.
our son went through this phase and it was like every single thing. Why? Why?
Right.
Like, golly. But
yeah, and if I am honest about it, the answer of because I said so is easy. It's present and available, and I don't have to try that hard to explain it.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. Why wouldn't I say that?
And I think it's okay if you say, well, I don't know why. This is just how you do it.
I do say I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's important to just tell them I don't know the answer to that, but I'm willing to work with you to find one.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, again.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on this a little bit. As times change, I think we have to change with the times.
Right.
Right. Every single person that we probably know could make some statement that starts off with some sort of back in my day type of, phrase there at the beginning of it. But guess what? It doesn't matter today. Like that experience and, whether that's in business or just in life in general or whatever it is, has brought you here. But because something worked 20 years ago doesn't mean that it's going to work the same today, if that makes sense. So you got to adapt.
In the necessity to embrace whatever that is, the nostalgia of that or the entitlement to be frustrated at the changing world is actually preventing you from progressing.
So
right? I mean,
this is later, but let me skip down and I'm going to tell you a story real quick. All right. So, everyone knows I like to listen to the Founders Podcast. And so I recently listened to an episode that was about Sam Walton. And so in that episode, and this is the point of listening to the Founders Podcast, I've never heard one single person on there that has anything to do with the fence industry. But this is the point of it. So Sam Walton was able to beat Kmart, which was a much larger business when he started. I think they had something like 1,600 locations or whatever, like when Walmart was a baby. And they said because the executives at Kmart were fat and happy, right? They thought that they ruled the world and they didn't have to progress. They didn't have to make any sort of changes or anything. They just said, oh, well, doing it this way got us to where we are. And so we're just going to keep doing it that way. And here comes little Sam Walton. And he's like, I think I'm going to do it a different way.
That's right.
And when's the last time you've seen a Kmart? Right?
I mean, that's rhetorical, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, good.
So Sam Walton was
I don't know.
Right.
Because I said so.
Sam Walton was that kind of dude where like nothing was ever good enough, and he always was trying to make progress and always changing things, and he was always looking. They said that he would go to retail locations anytime he was in a city, would go to retail locations in the city, not
I
just
love that.
Walmart. And he would go in there and talk to, the staff, talk to customers, whatever, and just try to figure out like what's working, what isn't working. And just to kind of, go a little further into his openness to accept change. I think it was in like the mid or late 70s, Walmart put in their first computer system. All right. And he spent $500 million in the 70s to
Wow.
put this computer system in. And then he later was interviewed and someone asked him about, investing that money into the computer system and how he thought it worked out and all of this stuff. And he said that the amount of man hours and money the computer system saved Walmart could not even be calculated by the computer. So, I mean, $500 million investment. But there you go. There's an example.
Is that because the technology didn't exist to do math on computers yet?
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, sorry. You broke me for a second on that. I was like, wait a minute. I'm broken. That did not compute.
But that's pretty crazy. 500 million. And that was like in a time when I don't know the history of retail, but I feel like computers weren't really used. It was just old school cash registers.
I don't know. I wasn't born yet.
Right. Me neither. But I know that computers were like the size of a house at that point, right? So anyways, like I said, that was supposed to be later on, but it felt urgent, man. We just had to get there. Had to get it out. You okay? You still broke? I know. All right. So I think a lot of these things apply to people, either if you've been in business for any number of years, or if you're just starting off and you're maybe looking for an edge in your market. I think some of the stuff we're going to talk about really applies. And I think if you've been around for a long time, you're going to have to adapt because there's a new company that's going to start today that's going to be operating in today's world. And you just might be Kmart if you don't adapt. If you're just starting off, then you might want to think twice about, trying to mimic what an old company's doing.
Right. Try to exercise some ingenuity.
Mm-hmm. So I think I agree. Ingenuity. You'd be better off to, I'm not saying that like people that have been doing things the same way for a long time are all wrong, right? Don't take it like that. Again, it's just about that like open-mindedness and like the possibility that there may be a faster, easier, whatever way to do something as opposed to the way that you've been doing it. So if you're starting off and you're looking at these older companies that have been around forever, then just kind of like maybe go through that in your mind, right? Before you just adapt whatever practices they have, maybe go through in your mind and like, well, is that really the best way? So kind of ties into like the educational classes or, sessions or whatever that we talk about a lot. And with that stuff, I've talked about it before, but I mean, I used to be opposed to that. I didn't want to listen.
Right.
I didn't want to listen to podcasts. I didn't want to go to any classes. I didn't want to do any of that. And somehow at some point I like slipped up and listened to one. Right. And then next thing you know, I was like, wait a minute. I don't have to listen to every word that these people are saying. Right. Because it's not about me sitting here taking notes and building my life around what they say.
The purpose is not to emulate what someone else is doing. Right. I mean, it's like I think with every person I interact with, I think there's the prospect, if I'm open to having like one gem that they may not even have said to me intentionally. And we've talked about that before, where you pick up on something from a book or something you hear on the radio that is like pertinent to something that you're trying to accomplish. And you're like, wait a minute, that was the piece.
Yeah.
That grouping of words happened to register with me, maybe in a context outside of even what it's affecting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. It's like that, like, oh, wait a minute. The Founders Podcast really helped me out implementing this new process at work.
Yeah.
And seemingly unconnected stuff,
Kmart and Walmart kind of thing. So But yeah, I mean that's what I think. And so now today, I'm a big advocate for all of this type of stuff. Podcast, educational sessions, classes, whatever you want to say. Um, and I mean, I think you can go sit through an hour, half day, day, 3 day, whatever, and you're going to walk away with something.
Right. And again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but just like making use of softwares for me as a fabricator, I always just hand drew everything. A lot of
Mhm.
times I would draw it on the table with soapstone and was pretty much like, I don't need a computer to do what I'm doing. This is I'm a blue collar guy. I work with my hands. This is how you do it. You do it with your hands. And I was a paper and pencil dude for a long time. And now, honestly, like, I don't start a project without drawing it or modeling it first.
Right.
And what that's done is it helps me to accurately calculate material, especially like material consumption when you're going to have like a weird drop that you didn't really expect because you just kind of add up all the linear foot pieces when you do it on paper or whatever. Also, it prevents me from making a lot of weird mistakes. Like you can easily kind of build yourself into a corner that you have to make some crafty way out of because you didn't anticipate how two parts are going to interact
Mm,
with each other. Wherein
yeah.
when 3D modeling or even 2D for that matter, you can kind of get a base level for understanding of that. So I don't even start a build without modeling it first.
Right.
You know?
So we've shown some videos of like truck beds that we built.
Yeah.
Everyone's seen. Well, I mean, there was some content out there with our trade show booth, all of that.
Right.
And so, like, all of those things are drawn on a computer before they ever go into like real life.
Yeah.
So, the last truck bed that we built, everything was drawn out on it. All the pieces were ordered, cut to length. Everything came in, and it was kind of more like putting together a Lego puzzle.
Right. Which is kind of funny to say that like I adopted this technology in 2018 or something when it's been around since 2012 or 2010. I mean, CAD, people have been using CAD forever, but
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm looking back like, man, that could have saved myself a lot of oops. Oh,
Drawing a line on a computer is a lot cheaper than cutting a piece of material
that's
wrong.
right. That's right. Luckily, you can weld things back together, but then again,
Yeah.
again, also in that same avenue, there you have something to show your customer.
Yeah.
So
Once again, we have some presentable to give to our customer. So in that whole like blue collar guy, this is how I do it. I don't need a computer to do it for me, like mentality. Is there some threat of being replaced by a computer?
I don't, I don't know that I ever was afraid of that per se.
Mm,
And do I think that there is a threat? No, not
okay.
currently.
Okay.
Now, I mean, save for our crazy AI talks with Cooley Tech, um,
Mm,
who that could go way down a whole nother path, right? But
mm-hmm.
currently, no.
Yeah.
What it has done is actually made me more employable, right? Like the understanding and knowledge and use of software in a computer has furthered my ability in the craft and trade, right? So it made me better, not just as a fabricator, but also situated me to be or suited me to be situated in a position of management as well. So like who doesn't want to further their skill set, right?
So let's go down this path a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's think through this kind of like scenario, right? So it's 2017. You're working in the fab shop at Memphis Fence. We want to build a truck bed.
Right.
Right. So I come over here with a piece of notebook paper with a super rough sketch of a truck bed. And I'm like, hey, we need to build this. Can you make a material list for it?
Right.
Right. And so now you kind of like sit down and you start going through and figuring cut links and doing all of this stuff. Right. So that is a skill, being able to create that material list
That's true.
and being able to think about how the parts and the pieces go together and kind of having that like forethought. Right. As where on the flip side of that, it's like, oh, I'm going to draft everything. I'm going to come up with the cut list and the material list and all of that using some CAD. And I don't need a guy in the shop that is capable of figuring all that out.
Sure.
Right. So now could I then hire a person that was less expensive and less capable and just say, put it together like this, the way it's drawn? I don't know the answer to that question, and
Well,
I'm not saying that
that's
that's a
under the
fact.
presumption that you, in this scenario, want to work in your business for the rest of your life.
Right.
If because what was happening accurately in 2017, real time, was you had the potential to draw in CAD and give to the shop, but with the people in the shop were drawing by hand because it took that time and the workload off your plate to be able to run the business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, maybe that's true, but ultimately then now you have two employees, one that's a CAD drawer and one that's just a skilled fabric or assembler or whatever.
So I think it's a difficult combination. Maybe it's a hard combination of people to find.
Right.
A person that would come work at Memphis Fence Company that has CAD capability, but also has that building thing
Sure.
capability,
Sure.
right? Because I mean, I personally believe if you can build a thing, you can build a thing within reason. And so, like, if you've built fence your whole life and your gates and whatnot, and someone wants you to build a truck bed, like, just calm down. You can do it.
It's
Right?
just a weld.
Just
It's
a
a
thing.
fillet weld and a butt weld.
Right.
Just increase the temperature and make a larger weld or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
well, so that is an interesting segue to get us back to, or whatever, what it was ain't what it is, because we've had this conversation about filling positions in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and my question is, why can't I hire the guy who can draw his own gate and make his own material list?
My immediate reaction to that question is because that guy's doing it for himself.
That's what I think too. I mean, we've had this conversation. It's like maybe the skilled laborers have aged out of being laborers and are now self-employed.
Maybe.
Is that the day and age we're in, which we are largely reliant on subcontractors currently for a big portion of the work we're bidding?
Or is that, like I said, is that person just rare? Right? Is it, I mean, specifically with like the custom built ornamental fence and in that kind of world, like we know that's a pretty uncommon thing here. There may be other areas where it's a lot more common, but there's only a handful of people that'll even do that around here.
Right, in this area for sure. And that, for me, I had that like back in my day, kind of, I talked to you about this reminiscent thing about driving down this neighborhood where there's a lot of custom ornamental fence.
Mm-hmm.
And currently what's being put up around town for the most part is prefabricated iron.
Right.
And it's like the good old days of maybe being able to compete, or whatever, having the talent or whatever that looks like, being able to, a shop being able to support that and support themselves as a business has gone the way of or taken a backseat to this new version where it's all prefabricated.
So I'd have to put some thought and some time into coming up with like a legitimate hypothesis. But again, I'll give you my immediate reaction to that. How much does a person in the shop get paid today versus what they got paid 20 years ago? How much does a robot or some sort of automated manufacturing piece of equipment cost today versus how much it cost 20 years ago?
Right.
Right. And so you can see how that kind of like pendulum has swung the other way. And
well,
so,
robots don't get sick.
right. Well,
Robots presumably make fewer mistakes, I guess,
right.
so they won't cut the material short.
Right.
I mean,
So less mistake, less, dealing with human beings. Right.
right. But the wages are proportionate to inflation, right? I mean, so that doesn't.
Yeah. Don't take me as complaining about wages today. Right. I'm an advocate for paying people more.
Sure.
And I meet resistance
Right.
within our organization to not pay people more. So, but yeah. So I'm not complaining about the wages, but I think it's an interesting thought that maybe wages have increased and the cost of building a somewhat automated manufacturing system has decreased, which has then reduced the cost of prefabricated ornamental fence
Right,
as where it
for
has
sure.
increased the cost of fabricated.
Right.
I know for sure that in the past 10 or 11 years, our like cost or price to the end user of our custom built ornamental fence has increased by probably 4 or 5 times.
Right.
Um, and that still at that, like it's sometimes we have pretty decent margins on it. Sometimes the margins are junk, even with the higher costs that we have now. But a lot of times I think that's all because of that human error that's involved in it too.
Right.
I don't know. That's a very interesting thing. So.
Yeah, to the extent that we're examining, speaking of open to new versions and new ideas and trying new things, we're examining selling prefabricated fence.
Yeah.
And using subcontractors to install it to test to see if that works better.
Yeah, we
can produce better margins that way, right?
We've done some here and there over the years, but it's not been our big thing.
Right.
But then, Toyota
Well,
Muda.
I have been currently looking into that more and more, which is hard for me. I'm connected. Obviously, every time the word fabrication comes up, I chime in with some connection and relationship to fabrication. I like it. I'm a fabricator. I want us to do that. I worked in the shop, so there's all that stuff going on, and so for me to kind of cross the threshold of like, okay, well, maybe it's time I let go of the handmade by American men and look. I mean,
for me, it's kind of that pride and ego type thing, right? Not necessarily because I have such a deep sentimental attachment to it. I mean, that fabrication shop is the first place that I ever legally reported to work at Memphis Fence Company, but I don't know that I necessarily have as deep of a connection as you. However, I do think it's really awesome whenever someone's like, "Hey, can you do that?" And we say, "Yeah." Or whenever we get to take pictures and post things that we have built. And whenever I can sit down at my computer and pull up AutoCAD and design a crash gate, and then it turns into a tangible thing that's installed, like that kind of stuff is really cool to do. And it's fun and it's enjoyable. And like at the end of the day, we have to do something that we enjoy sometimes, right? So a lot of what we hear about nowadays is the workforce, right?
Right.
And so everyone's heard the story. My grandfather and his uncle started this business in 1971. His brother, my great uncle, actually. So he sold out his portion of the business at some point in the 80s, right? And the story that I got was that when he sold out his portion of the business, it was because he did not want he said
couldn't tell a man what to do anymore and he'd do it.
Yeah, exactly. So when I couldn't tell a man what to do, I knew it wasn't no place for me. Right?
That's crazy. But I get that. I mean, we've had you and I've had the conversation where I'm like, he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And you're like, well, did you tell him to do what he's supposed to be doing?
Right.
And I was like, his job title is supposed to be doing,
right.
Whatever example is, I'm not going to out anyone, and that's crazy to me. That's crazy that I should be like, your job title is. When we hired you, we read your resume. It said floor sweeper, floor sweeper, floor sweeper, floor sweep. The only jobs you have, and as far as I'm concerned, the only thing you know how to do is sweep the floor, and you're not sweeping the floor. And I, as the manager, have to come to you at 7:00 each morning and tell you today is also the day, just like yesterday, that you'll be sweeping the floor again. Or else you won't be doing it.
So, you know what this reminds me of? Remember we talked about the job description thing the other day?
Yes.
All right. So, in the scaling up Rockefeller habits, I know.
I don't know why I got so excited. That was not even a real thing, but I sure seemed like really worked up for a second.
In the
just give me a second.
In the scaling up Rockefeller habit, all that stuff.
Right.
They said that like they're not an advocate for job descriptions.
I need an update on this.
I don't know because I haven't listened to the stinking book since then. All right. But so Zach and I talked about this, and we're just off script completely at this point. So let's just embrace it, I guess. And so when we talked about it the other day, it was like, well, if you have to give a job description to somebody that tells them at 7 a.m. you are to report to work, you are to grab your broom, inspect it for any defects, Make sure that you have on the proper PPE, and make sure that you turn the lights on, clear any obstructions that are too large for your broom to move prior to beginning sweeping the floor, and then start sweeping the floor. But as you sweep, you're going to have to then use a dustpan to scoop up the things that you sweep and then put them in the trash can. And at the end of the day, we're going to weigh the trash can to see how much you swept up and put in there. Right. So,
So let me shorten this or just sum up. Basically, if you're going to designate what sounds like ultimately micromanaging or a step-by-step how to do your job on the daily basis for a person, then that's not a person you want in your employ.
That's the question. If we have to detail out, instead of just saying go sweep the floor, if you have to give them
how about
an SOP in proper floor sweeping, and they're not capable of just going and picking up a broom and sweeping the floor and knowing what to do, or even having the like willingness to think, what should my next step be? Right. I think that's the key part of it. I don't think the knowing what to do is the key part. I think thinking what's next. And if you don't know what's next, then asking someone's what's next. I think that's way more important than knowing, right? But if you're not that guy, like maybe you're just not meant to be a part of our team here. Or maybe.
Right. I think so. What I was thinking about is in a job where I was in a factory. And if I didn't have a station, I can't imagine if you just came into work every day and you just went to the station of your choice or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like what if so I was a rolling mill operator at the Hershey factory, which means I cranked a big wheel that depressed two large steel rollers that ultimately decided the end thickness of chewing gum, which is not the most. And I lubricated the machine every 4 hours or 2 hours with 55 gallons of powdered sugar, which that part was pretty cool.
What? You lubricated it with sugar?
Yep. Lubricate the machine with powdered sugar.
Huh.
So the wheels don't stick to the gum.
So you
right? Like think a rolling pin and flour or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
sugar.
All right.
So
I was thinking like you put sugar in the bearings or something, but
no.
Okay. Got it.
I don't know that it had whatever.
Yeah.
But could you I mean, so that job's being done. If I didn't man that machine, it would clog up or it would roll it out into a long squirrely thing on the floor or whatever. Right. Which could create all kinds of problems. But if I decided to just go over to the packaging machine and start packaging instead of rolling and nobody was rolling, not to mention the like doing the same job every day, you do that because you develop muscle memory there and you're more efficient at your job.
Right.
So a little bit of compartmentalization. I think that's the purpose of job descriptions. Right. I mean, imagine if here I just decided I was going to start paying the bills. So now I'm accounts payable.
Or you're going to start sweeping the floor.
Either one. And yeah, like, so I was paying the bills yesterday, but today, you know what? I decided I'd really like to go sweep the floors.
Right.
So, and I think that's where that comes in.
So how do you know what your job is if you don't have a job description? How do you, Mr. Zach Shue, know what you're going to do when you show up to work tomorrow?
That's a good question. I guess you've entrusted me with the responsibility of designating my own job description. If we're going to be just like transparent about that.
Or were you hired to do a job? And like we had a conversation about the job, and then you had some level of communication.
Just kidding. In the initial conversation, I was under the impression I would spend 30% of my time in the shop, which that's not even close. But again, I'm with you on if you have to tell me what to do and you have to wonder if I'm doing it, then I'm not the guy for the job.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so I'm in agreement with you. And I think at times I've even been like, hey, isn't there something else I can do for you? Or why don't you rely on me for this so that you don't have to do that? And that there is that place, I think, for certain people.
So maybe my struggle is just that for job descriptions, I just I'm too in depth with it. Right. Instead of it just being like kind of high level, maybe I want to just like get all the way off in the weeds
and say, in job description, maybe job title and job
Mhm.
description, and that's where your disconnect is.
Right. Yeah. I just want everyone to come to work and just be like, all right, guys, what do we need to get done today? Right. Okay, let's do it. Like if
Well,
I got to
man,
go sweep the floor this time, I'll go sweep the floor. And I know
what it was ain't what it is,
it
man.
ain't. It ain't. So in kind of back to that in the racing world, everyone used to complain, right? This is I think it's a good analogy. I don't know. You can tell me if it's
I'll
good or
let
not.
you know.
All right. So
I'll give you an honest
we
assessment.
me and my brother used to race sprint cars and traveled the United States doing it. And so in those days, people would complain about like, oh, the track's too dry, it's too wet, blah, blah, blah. It's too rough, it's too smooth, whatever it was. Nobody's ever happy. And so I can remember somebody saying, everybody's racing on the same track,
Yep.
right? And it's like, oh, wait a minute, you're right. If it's too dry for me, it's too dry for the next guy, right? And we're all just trying to do the best we can on the same track. And whoever does the best by overcoming the obstacles that are presented on that
That's what
particular
racing
night
is.
is the one that's going to win.
That's the game, right?
So you think about that
I
as
think it's a fantastic analogy, and I'm probably
let's-
reading deeper into it than most, but
oh
I'm
no,
with you.
I think it's great. And I think it could go super deep. So think about the comparison between that and business, right? So us in our competition, we're racing on the same track.
Sure.
The same people, the same material availability, the same
Labor force,
labor
workforce,
force,
whatever,
right?
same reluctance to change and stupid opinions that we've developed and considered anchor points in our whole lives.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so we're racing on the same track. So
Right.
whichever of us can overcome the obstacles of the track the best and get to the finish line first, we're the one that's going to win.
Right.
Man,
Yeah, so
that's good stuff.
the best place to be when behind the race, the what? When behind the wheel of the race car
Mm,
is having not ever designated your preference of track.
right. So you have to be open-minded.
Right? So wet, dry, slippery, whatever you want to call that, hot, whatever the conditions may be, if you just
Oh,
call
man.
it track, you haven't tethered yourself to the anchor point that's limiting your potential.
I don't really think a person has experienced how it is to be hot and miserable unless you've put on like 5 layers of Nomex and sat inside of a sprint car with a 180-degree motor on the other
We
side
should
of a half-inch thick
we
piece of
should have
aluminum.
a
And
PowerHouse Finch show, dirtiest jobs episode. And basically we'll collect data from all of the tradesmen we know and get like what was the worst working condition you've ever experienced.
yeah.
Dude, over the weekend I set and then framed up 100 feet of double-sided wood privacy fence,
Mhm.
and I hand loaded the material by myself, right, which is a decent amount of material. I mean, 16 posts, 16 bags of concrete, 32 by 4s, right?
Right.
Don't do the math. That was about right, actually. And at some point in there, I was like, it's just pain. It's just physical pain, Zach.
Mm.
Pain is a figment of your imagination. And then, like, the smart part of me was like, what about heat exhaustion? And what about the pain that's a warning that you're about to expire? Like, is that not a thing? But
So
yeah,
how do you decide that it's you just being a sissy or
I
if it's your
did. Well,
body actually like
I didn't die. I drank some water and I kept rolling, man. I was like, dude, my muscles are sore.
mm,
I mean, it was a lot of work. And I determined, next time bid for a helper.
right. Right. For sure. So speaking of setting post, we are currently trying to decide what it is or if it ain't what it was on our set truck.
Oh yeah, big time. That's where this came from, I bet.
Probably. Maybe.
Because we were talking about mixing concrete ourselves versus ordering concrete. And basically, right now we are looking at something like a $250,000 expense to avoid whatever potential time constraints or inefficiencies or contrast or whatever you want to call it, that is ordering concrete to the job site, because the way it was that you couldn't get it when you needed it. And so for 20 years, we've been mixing it ourselves.
I think for
40 years.
50.
And so basically we're like, wait a minute, why are we going to buy a new truck, a new trailer, and use whatever the resources of the fabrication shop to create this new rig? Why don't we just order concrete?
Right.
And the answer is tribal knowledge. Again, we've been relying on, because you can't get it when you need it. Well, how long has it been since we tried that? Oh, I don't know. 30 years. We tried it once 30 years ago.
No, we try frequently. When we're on bigger jobs, we still call the concrete truck and get them to come out,
I'm making a ridiculous illustration, but that's where the whole what it was ain't what it is conversation came from, is because we're going super hard down this path without really questioning why we started down the path to begin with.
Right. And so for my entire life, we've ran these big set trucks. All right. And actually there's a video out there. Is it on PowerHouse, Ilaria, on YouTube?
Which one?
The one of the set truck?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So if you go look around on YouTube for PowerHouse Fence Show, then you'll see there's a video of a big blue truck.
Yes.
And that's our set truck. And so you'll see in that video that it has a sand and gravel box on the back. There's some, we put Portland in there. It's got post racks. It's got a skid steer on the back, all of the concrete mixer, whole 9 yards. And so when we're doing like small to medium sized jobs, that's what we're running.
Right.
And so we'll put a person or two in that box, and they're shoveling sand and gravel into a mixer, putting Portland in there, putting water in there. And then the skid steer's basically
hauling a hopper to each hole.
Yep. And so that's where it's interesting. We decided the title of this show, right? And then I was like, oh,
in the midst of that conversation.
And then today I was like, wait a minute, Zach, what were we going to talk about?
Why'd we name the show this?
Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, that's where the question came from. And so I reached out to a few people and I was like, hey, what are you doing in this scenario? And what I figured out is people are either mixing Satcrete or they're calling a concrete truck. Right. I called a concrete company today because we're doing.
You mean they're dry setting?
No.
I'm just kidding. I just wanted to be controversial for a second.
You just want to get in that?
I don't care. I read on the Satcrete bag or website, it says pour the concrete in the hole and then add the recommended amount of water after you pour the dry concrete in the hole.
So the actual instructions
Yes.
are to dry set. Interesting. All right. So
I can't remember. That was Satcrete or Quickcrete.
Yeah.
Because I Googled how to set a wooden 4x4 for privacy fence.
Just for fun.
Yeah.
All right. So today I called a concrete company and I was like, hey, I got a job. I need about 10 or 12 yards of concrete. I'd like to set it up in 3-yard pours. What's your availability? And they're like, just kind of when we can fit you in. And I was like, does that mean that if I wanted it now, you could bring it now, or you could bring it in 7 days?
It depends on my availability. Well, what about now?
Right. And so that was kind of like the conversation that we had. And then it got to where they're like, oh, we're not super busy right now. Things are pretty calm. So, we should be able to get it to you next day.
Next day.
Right. And so, that's okay. Like, it's not that hard to coordinate, but you can imagine if you have to order concrete 4 days in advance. So the job that I'm talking about specifically, it's a DOT job. We're putting right-of-way fence in. It has to be an approved concrete mix by a certain supplier. And you could get the mix design done by somebody else and go through the approval process and all, but it's just easier to get the one that's already approved. So I have to, you can imagine on that job, if we had to order it 4 or 5 days out in advance, that would be pretty tricky, right? So now either have to go dig holes and just stick the post in the holes and let it sit there for a few days, or I'm trying to like rush out there the morning that they're going to be there, get everything dug and be ready for the concrete truck when it shows up.
Right.
And so then we get out on site today and we're just kind of doing like preliminary, let's get some stuff laid out, kind of figure out what's going on, all that. And the stakes that they had for the fence were directly on top of the water main. Right. So there's a 12-inch water main, and it's like they installed the water main on the same line that they drew as fence.
I love this game.
It happens all the time. It's so
Let's
crazy.
put everything all in the same line. Oh, even the things that have to penetrate the ground.
I think that I think they're trying to save money on ink. All right, so they just draw one line, and it has a note on it. It says, fence, water main, gas line, electric, telephone line.
And that's one way that it still is.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah. So now it's like, all right, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to move it? And this guy's like, oh, you got a probe?
So, right.
Can you go out there and probe it and find that water line?
Like stick a metal rod in the ground?
Yeah.
That sounds scientific.
Yeah. So what we did was I said, no, I don't have a probe. What I have is a waiver that you can sign that says you told me to put the fence within the whatever dig free zone or whatever. And if I hit a line, you're going to pay to fix it, not me. Sure. I said, I've got that. Would that be interesting to you? And
I've had that one.
And
so we're not digging right there. They're like, will you please dig right there? Even if I give you permission. I said, yeah, sign the waiver.
So whether it works or not is kind of up in the air, because really you're the one that called in the locate. You're the one digging the hole. You're the one that they're going to send the bill to.
Right.
And then so in turn, you have to send a bill to whoever you're working for and hope that they're actually going to pay it.
Right. So I had one contractor, they were on site when MLGW came, and they were like, who hit the line? And they're like, well, they identified themselves as a certain contractor company, in MLGW, which is our local utility company, was like, well, what company hit the line? So they weren't even going to let them assume responsibility. They had to legally ask who was the person who was holding the tool.
The person who was holding the tool, when they receive a paycheck on Friday, whose name is in the top left corner.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So, anyways, what happened was we then sent a backhoe out there, and that backhoe went out and just started digging holes in the ground, and it dug a hole and it found the water main.
Nice.
So one person told us it was 5 foot deep. The next person told us it was 4 foot deep. The backhoe said it was 32 inches deep.
Yeah, we had some of that. I have that too.
The post had to go 3.5 feet in the ground. So had we just dropped an auger off in the hole, we would have hit the gas main.
You would have set a post inside a pipe.
Yep.
Nice.
Right. Which we can tell you.
I'm curious how the wrap up on the concrete. Remember, my idea was to offer them a sum of money to be on the preferred list of people who, when we call, they come. Right? Like
give them a retainer.
Yeah.
Zach said, well, let's just give them $150,000 and get them on retainer.
Right.
Something
and
along
that
those
way,
lines.
when we call, and we'll spend up to $150,000 a year. If we go over that we'll pay over that.
Right.
If we're under, then they keep the rest. And there's
right.
That's illegal. Probably.
I don't know. If anyone's interested in hiring Memphis Fence Company in that fashion, then just let me know. We'll work with you.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't, well, like I said, the concrete company said they could be there tomorrow.
Cool.
Other people, those like small to medium sized jobs, mixing Satcrete, and they'll use a concrete mixer. And, one of the people told me like, oh, I can, just put a F350 or 450, pull the little concrete mixer behind it, set a pallet or two of Satcrete on the bed. There you go.
That's easy.
Right. And so instead of having this like basically semi truck is what we're looking at now, instead of having this whole semi truck that can go out here and carry all of your stuff and everything, like we just take 2 trucks. One hauls some concrete in a mixer and one hauls a skid steer. So we don't know the solution. We don't know what we're going to do. It's just kind of
I like this because we have talked about the uniformity of having all basically F550 flatbeds. And what you just described, there we go. Done.
So F550? No, F150, 550, 650. So those are the 3 vehicles that Memphis Fence will be purchasing. And in this new truck idea, We found
I
a
just-
trailer that would go behind an F-750. So I kind of cheated, but found a trailer that would go on the back of an F-750 and would work as a replacement for the International that we have. We're a little heavy on the International.
Right. I was
And
going to bring
so-
that up and casually mention that. I didn't know if you wanted to out yourself or
Not
not.
really,
But basically,
but-
we've have some concerns for safety, and we're going to follow suit and improve our method process.
Yeah.
Discontinue the thing that we think is relatively unsafe or presumably unsafe, right?
So the thing about like the mixing the concrete and all that stuff is I don't know at what point Memphis Fence Company started doing that. I assume at the very beginning. When was Sackcrete invented? Someone tell us when did Sackcrete get invented, right? When did they start making that?
That's probably Donnie, our all around office everything guy. I guarantee he knows that.
Right. Just for
It's
some
probably
reason.
like clearly printed on the bag too.
Right. So anyways, I imagine that whole mixing sand and gravel, the scrap trailers that we use, those were built to haul sand and gravel. So I think that's been going on forever. And it's been happening here forever. And so again, what we talked about earlier with that pendulum swinging, my theory is that the cost of labor has increased to a point where now it's like, is it really worth paying a couple guys to just
right.
mix
The
concrete
cost
all
of
day?
pre-mixed exceeded the cost of paying a guy to mix it at some point in time. And now we've kind of gone the other way. That production cost has decreased to the extent that now the labor cost applied to mixing it is exceeded the production balance.
Maybe.
These are theories.
Yeah.
These are
yeah.
theories.
Yeah, that would take some thought. So if we had, and that would be fairly easy to calculate. If we had two people in the bed of a truck mixing concrete all day long, well, you still have to mix the sackcrete. So like, how much faster is that really though? And that's the other thing I struggle with now. Do you still have two people in the back of the truck mixing sackcrete? And you're now picking trash up off the ground all over the place that blows everywhere and all. I just don't know. But anyways,
these boys put the bags in the hole. I'm just kidding. I have seen people do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the whole, I don't know, question, right? We don't really know which way to go. We've talked to some other people.
The other way you do potentially save on cost of the investment of the equipment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we don't have them.
Smaller truck would cost less money. And
I
mean,
guess our hopper would still constitute the mixer.
No, we still have a mixer. You just run a mixer that goes with an F550.
A new piece of equipment.
We have a mixer.
Okay.
So, I mean, honestly, at this point, I think I'm kind of leaning like the semi route. But that's a $50,000 trailer.
This is a great question to extend to our audience.
We did.
Right. So I want to request that they chime in, write in, call in, whatever. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you think we're doing stupid. Whatever you do. I mean, I really personally like the ordering concrete, just scheduling it.
Yeah.
It sounds genius to me.
Yeah. I think it would just be something. And again, we do that on bigger jobs.
Then again, I'm like just recently opened up to the outsourcing idea. And so I'm just all open over the place. Like what else can we outsource?
Right.
So
let's just outsource.
I'm a little outsource hungry.
We're just going to outsource it all.
Right. Even me.
We're just going to become brokers.
Even me.
So I had this bidding and project management thing here at the end. And so I'd like to just like cruise through this real quick.
Let's do it.
And then wrap up. So I think this is a big thing. And I experienced this a lot with Simpalo, demoing Simpalo to people, which if you have scheduled a demo and you're thinking about changing from the old system, I applaud you for even thinking about changing. So when I started bidding commercial jobs at Memphis Fence Company was like 2008. And what we would do is I would roll out very large pieces of paper and take a 3-sided scale and I would measure all the fence lines out. And that's where I started. And, immediately after that, I thought, there's got to be a better way. And like I constantly was looking for that better way until eventually I landed on making a better way. So just for like the technology that's available today is a lot different than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And so whether you're bidding a job, managing a project, your CRM stuff, all of that is a lot different than it was even, like I said, 5 or 10 years ago. Um, and there's people out there that have systems that they've been doing the same way for, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever that is, and they work. So I would not suggest that you just go in here and do a complete 180 overnight and a walk into work the next day with a new system. But you can kind of like start making progress and just take baby steps and, change some stuff up a little bit here and there to work towards having a new system. Um, and so again, don't change it all every night. So I think that standardizing your stuff is a big deal though.
Right.
So we experience that here at Memphis Fence where we have multiple different departments and the departments all operate a little bit different from one another. And so that's kind of been a thing that I've kind of been thinking a decent bit about is trying to like standardize how our departments work. So that way, if I have to be involved in a project, no matter what department is from, I can kind of like pick up the pieces and say, oh, this is what's going on. Right.
Right.
Because the process of bidding and managing a project and everything is all the same. And it's going to like make job costing easier because then when you hand the job information to Lynn, who then has to enter it in QuickBooks or whoever's doing that, then it's all the same, right? It's not like, oh, this is Zach's job. I have to do it this way. Oh, this is Dan's job. I have to do it that way. Like, let's standardize all of that so that there's one system that they have to follow. And
And right now we're all on different systems.
I know. So
Ish. I mean,
this is something that I've been thinking about a
Right.
lot here for the past couple of weeks is like we need to try to get this stuff on the same page. And also like another thing is kind of like back to the poem that we talked about earlier with where you want to sail your ship. Like I want to get out there with the big ships, right? And um so I think with the standardizing the systems and the process is like now scaling is a lot easier. So in our GC bidding world, when we hired Claiborne, that was the thing we talked about with him was, all right, we're going to start and this is the way that we're going to do it. And we're going to create a system from start to
Right.
finish that's scalable.
Right.
And so every person that we hire who's an estimator moving forward is going to operate on the same system. Right. And I mean, I can tell you like trying to keep, I don't want to say keep your arms around that because like, you got to let it go for it to grow and all this kind of stuff. But like,
yeah, and then you got a guy saying, "Why am I doing it like this?"
well,
And
I
as
mean,
we just said, we have to allow them the room to. Never mind. I take that. Not in this circumstance. I don't. In this circumstance, just do it.
Just delete this whole episode. It's all trash. No, so like I said, just kind of like trying to keep a handle on that and keeping people from going off on their own. What are those timelines called?
Yeah.
Or branch?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think that's what it's called.
We talked about that a little bit beforehand. But yeah, just trying to keep people from like going off on their own branch.
Yeah, to delineate from the method.
Main. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit tricky. And so that's something that we've been kind of like working on. And like that GC bidding world is the first thing that we started working on, right? And so we're trying to like standardize that, come up with a good system that then could be scaled and we could have 5 people doing it all the same way.
Right. And you guys implemented Monday.com when?
Oh man, like 2 or 3 years ago?
So 3 years ago. I don't know when you had the idea, but 3 years ago you actually implemented this project management / CRM, whatever you want to call it, software. And so 3 years in the making, still not even really to like your base level idea of where you wanted to be. So I just want to extend that. You mentioned like you're not going to change it all or expect a 180 overnight, but another thing we do, we have monthly meetings in-house with the administrative staff to discuss where we're heading on specific tasks or areas of the business we want to improve, and basically, have a business meeting, so to speak, where we document like what was talked about and then revisit those ideas, check in on where we're headed, where we're going, if there's any new info that's a part of that. And so that's kind of how we continue growing in that way.
Right. Yeah. So our council meetings.
Right.
Right. And so, I mean, it's a constant change, right? It's not like, I think it's kind of like we're fluid, right? We're
Right.
just constantly moving around. And so we're not like, this is how we do it and we're never going to change. Like, I don't think that you can be that way.
Right.
I
I
don't,
mean,
it may work for a while, but I think there's eventually going to come a time where that just catches up and it bites you in the butt.
there's a new tool or a new software or a new method. I mean, there's
Imagine if
new
you,
ways to do things.
I mean, it's like when cars were invented,
Right.
right? It would be like that resistance to buying an automobile because I've always ridden a horse. I mean, we as humans, we as businesses, I think we all have to be like on that path of improvement and change and pushing forward and whatever you want to say, just to kind of keep it going.
Yeah, there is a what is he? A monk, a priest.
I'm not sure.
So his name is Richard Rohr,
Okay.
and I guess he's a priest, a Jesuit priest.
Okay.
And part of his designation for the growth of a human being is that in the first half of our lives, we spend basically determining our identity and our beliefs. And so we create this set of fixed opinions and ideas.
Mm.
And then if we're unwilling to grow, then we spend the rest of or we face the prospect of spending the rest of our lives defending our opinions and our positions and why we worked so hard for those to be right, because it's like you have to justify, why was that cause so right that I spent the first half of my life developing it?
Right.
So now I've developed my identity and I'll spend the rest of my life defending it.
Right. And so I feel like all of us are like that.
Dude, yeah. When I
Right?
read that, I was like, oh my gosh, this applies on so many levels.
It's like,
It's not
what do you want on your hamburger?
right.
Right.
Well, I never take mustard, and I've never taken mustard.
Right.
Taken. Who the hell says
Right.
that?
Right. So, like, take something as simple, or what kind of pizza you eat. Right. I mean, so I guess it's kind of counterintuitive
Right.
for your business to be fluid because we as humans don't want to be. Right.
No, and everything says have a schedule, and we're like predisposed to this idea that, I mean, there is some necessity to being here. Take the time your business starts, or like attendance for an instance. It's, if you want us all to be here on time, but then also it's like we want to be a little bit flexible, but there's got to be an extent to which that stops. So there's like some rigidity, but also there's a schedule, but then there's also some flexibility. It's like having some organization and some things fixed makes sense, like working at the rolling mill or working at the packaging station.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's like, and I guess that kind of defines me a little bit. Is that like, I want the order and the structure some places. We just talked about the order and the structure of the GC bidding process so that we can
Right.
scale it. But then I also honestly am like fairly resistant to creating job descriptions for every person.
Right. So here at Memphis Fins, we believe in order and structure as it pertains to the GC bidding process. But what is okay is to choose any chair you like to sit in.
Right.
You want to sit in a beanbag chair? Who cares?
Right.
Whatever.
So we like it both ways. So you have like this little pogo stick chair, actually. What do you like balance on?
I can't remember what it's called. It's a balance stool, and I think it's made for like fidgety kids or something. But this is the adult version. It gets pretty tall.
Yeah.
And so I have a standing desk, and so when I want to sit, I just sit on this little balancy thing. And it's because I've ultimately led a pretty active career, and I just wasn't feeling it sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
It started to weigh on me a little bit.
You'd come walking around the corner and Zach's in the floor just doing push-ups just to like exert some sort of physical.
I tried going on walks at lunch, but the neighborhood's not very conducive. Just saying.
Yeah. It makes you pretty aware of your surroundings when you go on a walk around here.
Yeah, man. So be open. Look for insight. And I think that is like in the places that you will least expect it. You
Mhm.
know, you might get shown the light in the strangest of places.
Yeah. And so always be a student, be listening, be paying attention, and be prepared to capture the moment that maybe is that one that speaks to you, right?
On that note, I think we're going to close it. Thank you guys for joining us. Dan with his wise words of wisdom for closing the show. Appreciate all who are listening. Again, we'd like to extend to you to call in, write in, type in, whatever you do on your opinions and ideas around pouring concrete, setting posts, whether you mix it, whether you mix sand and gravel and Portland, or whether you're mixing Saccrete from bags or calling in trucks. How are you doing it? How should we do it? What do you think?
And actually, just any of this.
Right.
I mean, specifically that, like we are looking for the methods that other people use for concrete. So that would be super helpful. But I mean, if you have anything to say about anything that we've said, then feel free, reach
Cool.
out, let us know.
Thanks again.
Thank
Adios.